Okay, I have a talk this time about our Peter's and my long marriage. I have to admit that I thought it would be a much easier thing to talk about, but 3 times this week I've had a terrible time with it. Not just with me, but with the autocorrect, which keeps rewriting it. It takes out whole areas and moves them to different places. But I think it's straight. But if I do say anything really strange, please remember it's the autocorrect. And you can interrupt me anytime with a question if you like. Okay. When Peter and I first married in 1973, I didn't really think about longevity of marriage. I just made a basic assumption in the back of my mind about the fact that it would definitely last. In fact, I mostly was concerned that he might leave this life before me. So I made him promise that he would not do that, as if that made any difference. But it made me very happy when we made such a genuine pact together, and I was sure that it would last. And so far it has. In the beginning, I assumed that common interest was enough to make a marriage of a good relationship. But that was okay for the start, I thought, because what if interests change and the other partner would feel like it was a challenge to some kind of connection? I think that is also not a strong basis, finally, because emotions change a lot as well, and interests. And we could easily take these changes as a big challenge to our sense of self and security in relationship. But other things come to mind, like basic respect for each other and being a natural friend to the other. And I think these are very important parts of a marriage. But again, I don't think they are what make a marriage last. Marriages are held together also by social pressure and sometimes family pressure and sometimes just by loyalty alone. Now I think that as we grow older, it's so much easier to stay together and not look around for better prospects, because it's taken so much effort to make this one possible marriage work, and the idea of doing it over again is just too overwhelming. I think when two people marry and choose to stay together and last together for 10, 20, say 30 years or more, an incredible thing happens in that relationship. It's a third kind of relationship comes into being because of it. So there's the one person plus the one person plus a third entity made up of both. And I first wrote that it was something like the one person and the one person and the Holy Ghost, but Peter winced when I said that, so I think maybe it was better to say an indescribable third party arises made up of both at once. It's where the two people seem to become one. And that is a relationship which is very hard to break or to damage in any way. And it's a very hard relationship to destroy in any way whatsoever. And in this third inseparable party relationship, the relationship develops a great power of love that lasts through them, and the two become one, or so it seems. That is, they become a third inseparable party, and the relationship develops great power to reinforce itself. And at this point, I think it's much harder to take it apart in any way. You could say that the marriage has become a party of one and a party of the other, and the third indescribable party where the two become one. the marriage has taken on a situation like a sacrament, and it's not easily broken and not easily stretched apart and able to operate in any kind of difficult situation when it's unavoidable. In the relationship, the two people continue to act as themselves, but they are always looking out for the other's good fortune and happiness. This means that there should be very little communication because that is very important in marriages. But in Japan, they say a couple that's been together for a very long time develop ishin denshin, which means telepathic communication. They don't have to explain themselves to each other. They just automatically know what the other is doing and wants to do. In fact, I think this is where the relationship, the two people begin to resemble each other, which is often a quote about marriages where they have been together a long time, although I don't see it with Peter and I. I'd have to work hard to get his eyebrows. He has what in Japan is called dragon eyebrows. Anyway, I think communication is a very important thing in a marriage, but we have to be careful about it because very often we just talk to fill up space or talk to express emotions or talk to explain something that wasn't really necessary. But talking about things that are very important between each other, I think is important and requires a lot of diplomacy. When we lived in Japan, if we got into a problem with a neighbor or someone, usually it was something very trivial, we didn't have the language nuances to convey sympathy for the other person's viewpoint or explain that our behavior was unforgivable. So after explaining that to our teacher, Mrs. Chiba, whom we called Chiba Sensei, she said, well, just tell them sumimasen, or I'm sorry. But in Japan, sumimasen has nuances of, I understand your position and I ask you to forgive my unforgivable behavior. So it has all that in it. And so Japanese use it a lot. Constantly they say it. And so we tried it when we said it in Japan. And people responded very much to our saying it. In fact, they reciprocated by being extra friendly and helpful after that. But I would like to tell you what I think was the secret of our marriage. Forgiveness, and I say it because I'm afraid some of you will roll your eyes at it and think I'm off in some spacey plane. But I really think it's true. And I thought for the first time I wrote this, I was thinking of me. But actually, I think Peter probably predated me in that practice. And with the two of us trying hard to forgive each other, we have managed to have a peaceful marriage in our later life, although it was rather tumultuous in our beginning life. So now we don't say sumimasen, but we already know we're saying, please forgive my unforgivable behavior when we say I'm sorry. Anyway, I think forgiveness is a way to smooth everything. If you can't say I'm sorry, really mean I'm sorry and forgive me, then something is wrong anyway. In any relationship, it's the only position that relieves both parties of carrying extra something onerous after the talking is done. So it's considered a kind act and an act of love to ask for forgiveness, because then you don't feel that you have to carry the burden that you laid on the other person. So there is a saying, I looked it up and it was Alexander Pope writing to critics to be kinder to their words about other writers, because to err is human, to forgive is divine.
Ready?
I have to find where it is. I got it. I'm sorry, all the part pieces are placed in different areas that I put them in, so I'm just looking for the one that comes up next.
That's not it. I think you finished.
Anyway, I think I am finished. I can't find where there's another section, but I have not totally finished, but I finished my paper. What I wanted to say, I have to wing it since I didn't get it written down, but I've said it so often that you may fall asleep while I'm talking. This is about not clinging. For me, the secret of really getting along together in a marriage is not to cling to what happens. And I found it out the hard way myself at first. And I think Peter found it out before me, because he did have a tendency to let things drop. And it took me a while longer because I got a lot angrier. But then I finally was able to let things drop it also. But in the beginning, it's very hard because you just get so mad, it's hard to take back what you've been saying. So it took us time to get over fights because I just hung on to things really long. And when I did give up, it was because Peter was being so quiet and peaceful that I couldn't fight with him. It's like he wasn't there when I tried to fight with him. So I finally gave up and started to just let things drop, because I found it really was easier, and it really did make for a peaceful togetherness. But it took a long time to find that out for me. But I think that's the real secret to a long time together, is just not to hang on to things that make you both feel miserable. And the reason is you don't want the other person to feel miserable either, so you just let it drop to ease yourself and to ease your partner. That's what I think it is. And I hope there's no more eye rolling. But I do think that's what makes any marriage that makes it to 30 years, I think, is really lucky. Because most likely at 30 years it will keep going on and on. So we've been together 54 this year, 54 years this year. And we'll be celebrating our marriage in just a couple of weeks. So we've made it again to another year, which makes me very happy. And I hope it will continue. So to all of you out there who've had long marriages, congratulations. Had. And I mean people like you too, Mike. And Arvind. I know most people nowadays in here tend to have long marriages. And Rachel, of course. So, thank you for listening. If you have any questions and you're not rolling your eyes at me, then ask me anything. John?
Wanted to say I am not amongst it all. I found absolute truth in the things that you were saying. I haven't been married 50 years, but I've been married 32, 33, something like that. And we've definitely had our trials and tribulations, especially in the early going, like you said. But it's strange. We take a nice walk every morning together. And yesterday we were talking, about whatever reason, marriage, and how, like you said, and like the saying goes, to err is human. We all make mistakes in our relationships. We all do terrible things. And the ability to, like you said, forgive and to know that, you know, the grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is the same on the other side. You need to learn to, you know, live with the grass you have and
And
uh,
take good care of it
and take good care of it. That's
to
right.
make it green.
I totally agree. And after a time, you do start to become almost telepathic with your partner. You know how they feel. You know how the things you say hurt them, the things that they say hurt you. You 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 kind of become a little bit of that extra person, that another entity. I truly believe that was a I had never thought of it before, but when you said it, it made all the sense in the world to me. Truthfully, I do not eye roll at you, Jane. I believe you speak the truth. You must. You've had to live with Peter all this time.
Well, Peter is better at this than I am, unfortunately. I thought I was the best one at it, but I found out he was.
I'm just kidding. I love my Peter. But thank you so much for the talk. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I think I have to add to this conversation that Jane's been a little one-sided in my behalf.
I don't think so.
But anyway, I thank you, Jane. And Greg, are you sitting with your wife? Hi.
Hi.
Yeah. I don't think we've met. We may have met one time before on screen. I've met your daughter a couple times, 3 or 4 times. But yeah.
Anybody? Oh, Mike. Hi.
It's been a long time, so I don't have a whole lot of memories left over from that period. But the one thing I did remember from our relationship, especially when it started to, deal with illness and stuff, was that we originally thought we knew each other from somewhere else. We don't know why, but we always sat there. We would start a conversation that would last for days. And I would know what she was thinking. She would know what I was thinking. And I think what happened in our relationship, we became one person. We had a lot of the similar ideals, same ideas. I mean, she had her uniqueness, I had my uniqueness, but became one person. And when she passed, it did feel like I'd lost part of myself for a long, long time. And then finally realized that no, I was just clinging on to a memory and realized, there is good clinging and there's bad clinging. And it was one of those things where I finally, friends of mine convinced me that it's like you're too attached. You've got to let go. You don't forget, but you let go. And it made it a lot better. And I still have very fond memories of her and stuff like that. And it's you have to forgive your partners. If you're not willing to forgive your partners, you shouldn't be in a relationship because they're not going to be the same as you. If they're the same as you, that would be a boring relationship. So, the uniqueness kind of keeps it interesting. But thank you for your talk.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Anyone else?
Anyone else with a different idea, whether you're in a relationship or not? Well, is that all we want to talk about? Everything I said was enough,
Arvin?
Arvin?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but forgiveness implies that you recognize that you've done something wrong, you've hurt somebody, and you want to do something about it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What if someone does you wrong? You didn't do anything. What then?
I think finally, actually, I don't think it's possible for someone to do you wrong and you haven't done anything. I can't help but think that the little things that led up to it probably helped. And if you look back and saw that, you could clean that out. That may not be true, but it just seems that way to me. The big things, if someone does you wrong, is that you look back and you see what you did to bring it along, and then see what you can do. I've often found that an apology has never harmed anything.
John?
John?
As a bit of a reaction to what Arvin just said, I was actually talking to my son about this the other day, and I think it's something that we've spoken about before, and that's the difference between love and loving kindness. And I think that the two are often confused. Love can often be something that is very much an attachment that we are that we deal with in our relationships. And love isn't always a positive thing. Love often has led to many a, displaced tragedy. Whereas loving kindness is what we're looking for in relationships. You're looking for a relationship where you're giving of loving kindness and your partner is giving of loving kindness. And I think if there's no reciprocity with regards to loving kindness, this is the one place where I feel like maybe a relationship cannot be fixed. If there's one partner who is incapable or unwilling to give loving kindness in a free and unselfish way, it makes for a very difficult relationship. Love isn't necessarily a positive thing. It's loving kindness that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Arvin, do you want to answer that?
Well, I'm looking at relationships not merely within the closest family, but amongst us and all people in broadening circles around us and in the world in general. And I find it hard as I get older, harder and harder to separate the two. I can understand intellectually what you've said, John, but I can also see how, suffering is inflicted upon people. And, I am part of that circle. And I feel that, but there is also in our society now where we're exposed to everything all at once, it feels like you have to kind of put some distance between that and your everyday moments. And by doing that, you're cutting off that that connection to yourself that can respond to that. So when I hear you talk of relationships, Jane, I don't hear you talk. For me, the relationship is not just between me and my wife. That seems easy compared to me and my relationship with everybody else. It feels like very difficult to work that out.
Can I ask you what you mean by when someone does you an irretrievable wrong? How can you forgive that? Can you give me a kind of an idea of what that could be like?
Well, it's not irretrievable, and there's nothing that I mentioned was irretrievable. It's just that when the wrong comes at you out of nowhere and it's inflicted upon you because of something you didn't do, maybe someone else did something to this person, and it comes back to you. And it could be not just me, it could be anybody, because I could feel it. It's part of my circle. The wrong doesn't have to happen to me. It could happen to anybody, and I could feel it. And because that is my world. So that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. Some of the thing I was thinking about is that when we forgive people, we might think in our minds that we forgive them because they deserve forgiveness, but often it's someone who doesn't deserve it, in our opinion. That is the best way to forgive a person, because it takes a kind of heavy weight off your mind as much as it does off theirs.
Yeah, something else we might add to the conversation is when you in the process of of studying Buddhism is to study the self, and to study Buddhism is to forget the self. Those things are actually very, very useful. For one thing, when you understand that it's your world. I mean, your world is your world, and you look at it very carefully. There is that you're responsible for everything in your world, to yourself and to the people in your world. And it always does take two to fight. And so, but when you slowly find yourself less attached to the way having things the way you think they should be, and you understand the foolishness and one-sidedness of such way of thinking and living, then it's much easier to make what Jane called that one relationship as well. So we are always responsible for what is happening to us. It's not our fault. Fault is the wrong word here. But there's always a point where we could have changed it in some way.
Or could have done something in a better way.
Just, yeah.
Yeah.
John?
John?
Just maybe further address.
Maybe
Something further off the question.
I think I understand a bit of what Arvin's saying, and I wanted to give a reaction and say that this happens to all of us all day long, but at least the way that I try and deal with situations like this is the following. I know that almost everyone I see is broken. It's life is suffering, and suffering is People are broken. They're bound by delusions. And so for me, when somebody wrongs me, yes, initially I feel all the same things. But what I try and process is this, is that they're broken. And underneath who they are pure and good, as we all are. But on the surface, they're broken. And so should I allow, what they do and what they say is them. How I deal with what they've done is all me. So if I cling to what they've done and I let it affect me, that's me. That's not them. That's me. And that's me reacting based on my past experience rather than being in this moment and doing my best to be compassionate and sympathetic for what this person is dealing with in their life to make them do the things they're doing to me. Like, for instance, Arvind, I remember you told the story of you were walking down the street and some guys drove by you and were screaming epithets at you and, profanities, and how it, really bent you. And I told you at that time the same thing, that those people are broken and they need our help. And to internalize what they've done is basically the same thing. If a 2-year-old came up to you and kicked you in the shin, are you going to react the same way as if a 30-year-old male came up and kicked you in the shin? You're not going to react the same way, but it's the same exact thing. There is no difference between the two. And at least that's how I try and get through the situations that you're referring to.
John, I agree with what you said, except for the fact that people are broken. I don't think anyone's broken and no one needs fixing. They do need to grow up, however. And so I thought the part about kicking a grown man kicking you in the shit is like a 3-year-old. That's probably true.
Yeah. Chris?
Chris,
So I think forgiveness can mean different things in different contexts. Um, if a 2-year-old kicks you in the shin, then your response basically amounts to forgiveness. And I had to do this with my little sister when I was a kid, and I didn't want to, but my parents told me she doesn't know any better. So I guess I could say retrospectively that I forgave her for whatever it was, like throwing the remote at me or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I just wanted to speak up for the notion that forgiveness does entail some kind of social contract in relationship. That just because you don't so to speak, forgive someone, it doesn't mean that you're holding on to it. There is a way to let go of whatever emotions arose because of a given situation that doesn't amount to forgiveness, because especially if it's a stranger, there's no relationship to mend. But it doesn't mean that I'm holding on to something or that I'm attached to my feelings of hurt. I can give myself the freedom of moving on from an event without giving someone forgiveness, especially if they aren't apologizing. And I don't think you can really forgive someone who hasn't apologized, because if you say that you have, it's just a form of spiritual bypass. But that's
or
not important.
just taking longer to happen,
What's up?
or just taking longer to happen.
Yeah. So that being said, I think there's something that's like forgiveness, where essentially I've heard it expressed or paraphrased from Dogen as giving people to themselves. So I might not necessarily forgive a stranger for doing something like rolling up on me and my friend in his boat, and this stranger was on a jet ski, intentionally targeting us and then turning at the last minute to splash us with water. I still get mad every time I think about that. But So I didn't forgive him in the sense of, and I don't think forgiveness is ever letting someone off the hook, but it's two people together removing the hook. So I didn't forgive him in that sense because I never saw him again. But I did something that was like forgiveness, which is just caring for myself and my emotions by, whenever it arises, relinquishing the my grip on the story. And I think that that's worthwhile. And I think sometimes people would look at that and say, well, that's basically the same as forgiveness. And I just think it does depend on context. And that's just what I wanted to contribute.
Chris, when you got mad at the person running up and splashing your boat, you might get angry at it, but I think you might also think it's chickens coming home to roost. And maybe you have done, irrepressible things like that when you were younger and thought it was very funny. That things that you do when you're like 13 or 14 seem hilarious when you do things like that. But when you get older, they're kind of not done well. But that's,
Yeah.
I also think that what happens is you have to, you always take the high road as a word. You always are the generous one because somebody I don't think people are broken, but I do think they forget everything. And every time you take the generous stance, you give them space to wake up or to remember something. So the best,
Well, that generosity that you're speaking of definitely makes for a more pleasant life, I've found in my experience.
yeah,
Less suffering and whatnot. And and uh, and I don't think in any context that forgiveness is somehow a denial that a wrong was done. I think that's not the case. And I don't think that's what you're saying either, for the record.
I don't think that's what forgiveness is, to let it pass. It means to really forget it.
Spencer.
Spencer,
Hello. So this is a timely discussion because I had a falling out with a loved one a month or so ago, and we just started talking again. And, you know, it was hard, but I knew I had really no grudge. But at the time, what I found was, since I was with that person for a number of days straight, and I hadn't been with them in a number of years, my ego and my fear kept interjecting and projecting what onto them. And, for the first couple of days, I was able to accept, the condition or what was going on or even what was being said. But like, it got to a point I couldn't take it anymore. But that's on me. It wasn't on them. I know that I always think, you don't know what's going on in somebody else's mind. We're all our own world, right? And we're all intrinsically very different. So, you know, so this came to a head, and this person, sent me a long email of stuff that they felt to be true. And I said, heard, but I legitimately heard them. But I was called from their therapist appointment saying, is that adequate? And I said, yeah, it's adequate because I accept it. It's your truth. Okay, it's not my truth. Okay. And if you think these things happened, I accept that. Only my ego makes that different. So, if there was a me, that would be someone who might be slighted. But, I just have to go back to that. Who is it that was really slighted? Not me, but it seemed like this other person was really suffering. So, I think that's my context on it. But in marriage, it's much harder because there's no distance. So it's always that pressure and that, it's harder to forgive, I find, because there's not a
But
way to get back to the place of acceptance and nothingness. So that's my 2 cents.
thank you, that's good, Spencer. But if you're up close and personal with your partner all the time, you don't have to say I'm sorry so much. It just let things pass without making a big issue of them. It is doing the same thing, I think.
Yeah, but sometimes in relationship, the other person might not let things pass, and it's hard at some point. It's hard, right?
Yes,
So, and uh, I think it takes time. It takes zazen, but to be in a place where these things just don't impact us in any way, and to Arvin's point, with loved ones or not loved ones is a difference, but it's hard. I mean, I have to tell you, in the last 2 weeks, I've dealt with a lot of very strange people who've really tried to take advantage of me, and it really made me very angry. And I mean, I'm not going to get into the story, but it's really infuriating on one level, but I have to let it go because the only person that's being impacted is me. The only person who has mental suffering is me.
but you know what,
And
Spencer? If you're differing, if you're relating to all these people, the only ones I feel sorry for are not you, but the people who are differing with you.
no, I thought the same way. I thought, how could you live your life, taking advantage of others, I met these people face to face, shook their hands, and they lied. Like this happened 5 times, in 2 weeks. It's sort of crazy, different people, and I'm like, so in the mind, this is emblematic of society and blah blah blah. And like, I have to say, well, how am I contributing to this, or am I somehow creating these scenarios or bringing these people into my life? But it's harder to accept when they're not family. I have less inclination to, forgive.
Yeah.
So it takes more work.
Okay, anybody wanted to answer that or not? But Spencer, if you wanted to talk more about it, you can call us anytime.
Well, Peter's been involved with some of it, so.
Well, you can trust those dragon eyebrows.
Yeah.
What
but
does that mean exactly?
They say in Japan when eyebrows are like Peter's, they're dragon eyebrows. And some of them have eyebrows that come out like this, and those are really dragon eyebrows. His are just starting to come out, but they tend to curl up.
So I should watch out with Peter then.
Tread lightly. What were you gonna say?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Spencer. I don't think you're quite finished.
No. John was saying something in commentary on that.
Did you want to say that, John?
Well, I just wanted to say real quick as a finishing note that all the things that we're talking about and all the things that we talk about during our talks,
All right.
they're important and but we need to remember they're still just words and thoughts. The real work happens on the cushion. That's when, after time, you really these things are no longer thoughts. These things are no longer words, but rather something else happens when it becomes more a part of you and becomes internalized, and it becomes easier then, I feel like, to act in a, a better way in your life. I don't know the way to say it, but it just, the words and the intellectualization is one thing. The work is on the cushion, and that's when you really see what we're talking about internalized. Thank you. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
Mark?
Yes, well, I agree with John, that's where it starts. I agree very much, but it's not finished. It's something, that's why when Spencer has all these people trying to jip him perhaps, and I've had many things happen in the last couple of weeks that kind of defy, I have to ask myself, am I really a good person? There's been a lot of self-reflection. But I think really it starts on the cushion, John, you're right, but it ends up, it needs to be taken wherever we go and with whatever we do. And when we talk to our loved ones and when we don't talk to them, we have to watch out. Just exactly where are we in this? Where are we? Who is there? Who's being insulted? Who's being taken advantage of? Who is having the hard time? And we suffer from this so much. We suffer from clinging on that we are the problem, which starts with us. And it's a funny thing. It's like we have to release this to really understand it, is that our karma engages the world, which is full of all the other karmas, and we are pulled into these places that are really difficult to understand. And so I think it's really kind of beyond us. We do really need to find the ability to forgive and forget. It's truly to forget, because as soon as you tell someone you forgive them, you've already put yourself up, not on one cushion, but on two cushions. Your head's higher than them. I'm noble, I can forgive you. And that is really not what it's about. It's about forgiving and forgetting, and the next step you take in life is there on the ground. It's nowhere else. You're there on the ground, and everything is left behind. That's the most difficult thing in the world for me.
Anybody?
Yes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, that's a well said point.
I've been struggling too with everybody else out there.
Thank you, everyone. I guess it's time for our service.